Hi, this is Randy Woodruff of Suncoast CPA Group, and in the studio today I have Anthony Canaris, realtor of Berkshire Hathaway. Anthony and I are both partners in the Suncoast team, and we're both the Berkshire Hathaway with 4 or 5 other teammates, and I wanted him to come on the podcast today and talk about real estate. We've had some real estate conversations in the past, and between the podcast and other things I've done, touched on it, but Anthony is a wealth of information with his appraisal background, and I've bragged about that from time to time on the show as well. With his appraisal background, he really adds a lot of value to the team and to the real estate transaction, especially when it comes to the listing side, to make sure that if you're listing your house with us, that your house gets listed at the highest price possible. So here again, you can make as much money as possible. And I'm going to ask Anthony to kind of explain kind of the process that he goes through in he's going out to a listing appointment. I'm going to brag about him a little bit before we get started, but I know with 2 of my clients, I was talking to my clients, and they were selling investment property or maybe their primary residence, and they were talking about taxation. I go, hey, would you be interested in giving our team a chance to sell your house? They go, oh yeah, let's have your team come out. So on one particular instance, prior to us getting out there, they'd met with an agent or 2 agents, and the agent had given them a price. This is about 3 years ago. They'd given them a price range of 200, 225, something like that. Both that were in that same range. Well, Anthony, with his appraisal background and recognizing the value of construction, we listed the house at $249,900. We basically got a full price offer. The home closed. So that we basically, thanks to Anthony and his eye for construction, eye for quality, eye for attention to detail, was able to basically get the client, my client, and also Anthony's client, from a real estate perspective, and basically got all of our fees covered and then some. And the same thing happened on the property about 2.5 times that size over in Lake in the Woods. Same exact situation. We came in. There have been 2 or 3 other realtors out there. We came in at a much higher price, and I say much, probably $30,000, $40,000 more, and we got all of our fees covered and then some. So, and Anthony's got several stories like that to tell as well. But for me, those are just 2 things that come to mind, that when I'm talking to clients, and I know that I'm sending Anthony out or a team out, that we're not just doing a per square foot price calculation. We go out and take a look at the property, and Anthony knows what he's looking for. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Anthony Canaris to talk a little bit about his process that he does, and then his experience as an appraiser and how that helps him out in real estate. And also, he's got some market stats to share with us today as well. So Anthony, take it away, sir.
Thank you, Randy. Typically when when I'm meeting a customer for the first time, I like to go out to the property, and there's almost when we do an appraisal, we're identifying the problem. When I say a problem, there's a scope of work that's entailed with an appraisal. So you've got to identify what it is you're appraising, or what we refer to as the problem, and then you develop your scope of work. But one of the things that we're looking for typically when we go out on an appraisal is the quality of the property. We're looking carefully at the location, the overall condition. You're trying to ascertain an effective age of the property, which is, we're looking at all the components on the property, the air conditioning system, the water heaters, the roof, any updates or lack thereof. These are all critical components that come into the valuation process, but oftentimes what I'm looking for is anything that may be detrimental. So if we're going out to a property, we want to be able to offer financing. We want to be able to offer financing through the FHA, through the VA. Conventionally, the more market participants you can appeal to, the typically shorter your period will, the marketing or exposure period will be, the marketing time. So I want to make sure there's nothing adverse at the property. Sometimes there are very minor cosmetic repairs that people can make that can really increase the property value. Sometimes I'm going out there and, looking at the public record, we're only seeing so much looking at an exterior photo of it. I may be dealing with a level of quality that may be significantly higher than some of the properties that we may have originally predicated. If we did a CMA and we're giving them a suggested price range, I may see, and that's what happened with the property on Meadowlark. Mm-hmm. By all accounts, when we looking at that property from a public record standpoint, it was a 1,630 square foot house. There was nothing atypical about it. The price points that were discussed by the other agents out there, and even our initial recommendation on that property, we were all pretty close to each other. But once I got out there, you could see that property had a 9-foot interior wall height. They had tray ceilings, bullnose corners, decorative soffit shelving. It was a custom-built home out there. It wasn't a standard spec home that we would typically see in that section of Spring Hill. But these are the things that I'm looking for, because in every market there's a range of value. So nobody likes to leave any money on the table, so to speak. So, you always want to be able to get as much money for the seller as is possible. But if you're just using an arbitrary price per square foot out of the MLS, that could leave food on the table sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many things that you mentioned. You go into a house that you can't see from a picture from the road, or you get into the house, start walking around, and you realize that it's just a custom home. And so, again, that's what I appreciate about Anthony working with my clients, is that we're not just taking a price per square foot approach to value and making recommendations. We're doing the extra work, doing the due diligence, going over, I'll say, a comprehensive checklist that Anthony developed, from his appraisal background. Everybody on the team has to go through that checklist too when they do a listing. So here again, I can't stress enough how important that really is, to make sure that if you're listing your home, make sure you get someone that's not just going to give you a per square foot price. Make sure you got someone come out, inspects your property, goes through it in its entirety, walks around the house, asks you a bunch of questions. There's a lot of details that still we can't even see just by walking in, that you need to be able to share with us. So this is probably one of your biggest assets, if not your biggest asset. So make sure that the person that's going to be representing you takes the time, puts in the time to find out and learn about the asset so they can represent you well. So, and Anthony does do that. Anthony, let's talk about where we're at in the market today. I know we've all been, hearing about the, 6 months ago you had a listing or you had a home on the market. You were getting 5, 10, 15, maybe more than offers, most of them over asking price, because there was such a lack of supply and such a hysteria, to buy housing. And now that's definitely cooled off with inflation really starting to take its toll in the economy, and higher gas prices, higher interest rates. Interest rates about double what they were coming into the year in terms of a mortgage. So I know that's definitely things have cooled off. But I think you got some stats that you brought today. We talked about them in the past, and then before the show today, that that I'm not trying to say that things aren't cooling off, but some people may be thinking the bottom is about to fall out, and that's not the case. So why don't you go over some of these stats that you pulled today, and let's talk about them.
Yeah, if I can, before I read these stats, I have been a state certified residential real estate appraiser servicing this market area since 1996. So I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two, like the Farmers commercial.
Yes, love that commercial.
But I was here during that the big crash that we had at the end of 2006, beginning of 2007. And I want to use this as a benchmark just to put everything into perspective. When the bubble burst and the real estate market crashed, in the beginning of 2007, Hernando County, our MLS, had 5,200 homes for sale in it. And any given time, we had 5,200 homes just in our MLS, and that didn't include the builder's inventory. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of local builders that were marketing through their model centers. They weren't co-brokering and putting them in the MLS. So if you took that into account, there were probably about 6,000 homes for sale back in the beginning of 2007. That equated to about a 5-year supply of inventory. Now that's a bubble burst. That's a crisis. That is absolutely a buyer's market. And then you combine that with a recession that we stayed in for quite a period of time after that. It was very much a buyer's market. If you fast forward into 2022, while many people would have you think we've crashed and burned, we've not. You can't look at 2021 and use that as a benchmark. What we have experienced through COVID is unprecedented. To have properties in Hernando County rise at the rate that they have risen, to see a typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a 2-car garage generating over $2,000 to $2,200 a month in rent. These numbers are unheard of. We've never seen anything like this before. But today, I brought with me stats just before I left to come over to your office. These bring us into August of 2022. At present, we have a 1.94 month supply of housing inventory. Again, remember, when the bubble burst, we had over 5 years of inventory. We have 1.94 months. From an appraiser's perspective, and I know I had brought you a copy of the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, in which the very top part of page 1 gets into the an inventory analysis. So it will ask you about supply and demand, remaining months of housing supply, whether there's a shortage of inventory, a balance of inventory, or an oversupply. 0 to 3 months of inventory is still considered an imbalance. It's a shortage of inventory. That is still very much a seller's market. So with 2 months of inventory, we're still very much in a seller's market right now. Now, that could pivot, that could change with rates rising. If the market continues to cool, we could very quickly over the next quarter find ourselves in a situation where we have a 3 to 6 month supply of housing inventory. But at the present rate of absorption, we've got about 2 months of inventory out there. But when you look comparatively, I have the average list price in August of 2021 was $330. Fast forward into August of 2022, we're at $429, $354. If you look at your median list price, we were at $275 in August of 2021. Right now, we're at $369.9. Now, the numbers that really matter, because you can ask whatever you want for these properties, but what are people actually paying for these properties? In August of 2021, our average sale price was $268,340. In August of 2022, our average sale price is $318,776. In August of 2021, our median sale price was $250, and you fast forward to 2022, our median sale price is $307. So overall, the market is still significantly up, and even with the increasing inventory that we're seeing, the average cumulative days on market was 14 in August of 2021. Right now we're at 18. In August of 2001, the median cumulative days on market was 6. Right now we're at 10. So if you bring a property to the market right now and you bring it to the market close to its fair market value, there's still buyers out there. You're still going to get market participation. You're still going to sell your house. When interest rates were at 3% or below, and we had only a several week supply of housing inventory, especially at the rate of inflation that we were seeing and the length of time that it was taking to build a home, yes, buyers were overpaying, and they didn't care. They were willing to overpay. We were getting contracts $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 or more, depending on the price range that we were in, over the contract prices. But with the rates as low as they were, and what was your alternative? There was nothing to rent while you were waiting to build. If you were building, the builders, if you look at a builder's contract, they weren't guaranteeing the price that you were signing. They're able to pass on increases in material, labor, and whatnot to you. So a lot of folks would much rather have just paid a little more, amortize that over, whatever the length of their mortgage was, typically 30 years, and be done with it. Just know they locked up a home.
Yeah. Got some certainty if you do it that way. What's your thoughts on, we're hearing a little bit about people, I'm hearing that listing prices are coming down, but the sales prices are staying pretty strong. Is that what you're hearing too?
That's correct. There's in the bar graph that I brought you over there, if you look at the median sale price, there's really not a measurable drop in the median sale price. Median sale prices are holding fairly tight. The list prices, though, honestly, there was not support. Every time one property would sell, the next seller, would come on 5%, 7%, or 10% higher. There really wasn't support for some of the prices we were seeing anyways.
True.
So we are seeing some corrections. Definitely, and it's funny to see new agents in this market. Quite frankly, in 6 to 8 months ago, you could have taken your 4 or 5 images with a blurry iPhone, stuck it on the MLS and just said, send your offer with proof of funds or a pre-approval to such and such email, and you were going to get a contract. And there are a lot of realtors out there that have a it's a misconception of what it takes to sell a home.
Mm-hmm.
In the current market, you've got to work to sell your home right now. There are not going to be as many people waiting in line as there were 5 or 6 months ago, but there's still good market participation. No worries if you're pricing your home, close to its fair market value. You're going to get a contract on your property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear that the median sales price is staying pretty steady, and I have heard that listing prices are coming down, quite a bit. To your point, they were probably too high to begin with. It needed to come down. So Anthony, talk to me about the MLS here in Hernando. What I'm hearing is that Hernando County has its own MLS, and it's like a little island or a little all to itself. And other counties may have their own MLSs, and share with us some of the I don't want to call it pitfalls, but I think the consumer has a conception that they talk to a realtor, they get their house listed, they're going to have worldwide exposure, and that's not exactly the case. I mean, if somebody wants to specifically go to an MLS and look for that specific house, they can. But talk to us about the benefit of working with a realtor, that if your house is in Hernando, that the realtor is on multiple MLSs and syndicating this listing out to a bunch of different MLSs to make sure your house gets maximum exposure.
Well, in Hernando County, while we're an extremely large geographic area, our MLS, we have the Hernando County Association of Realtors. Then we have the Hernando County Information System. So our MLS, we utilize a system called Flex MLS. But we have a very limited reciprocal access. So Citrus and Hernando County have reciprocal access to one another. But even that can be somewhat difficult for the agent because they're two different systems. If I log into Citrus and I want to see their data, they use an MLS system called Matrix. We're using Flex. You need to be able to speak 2 different languages as you're searching these systems. It's not always that easy. But what consumers don't understand is that not all agents are the same. There are a significant number of agents, and I think before we went live, I was discussing with you, I was on a listing appointment the other day, and as we were trying to establish a price point, I wanted them to see what they were going to be competing against. There was a property on the street that I didn't bring with me. I didn't have it. They said, well, what about the one that was listed right up the road? Well, it was an agent that came down out of Citrus County and put the property only in Citrus County. We have no idea it's in there. I have no reason to want to jump into the Citrus County MLS to look for inventory in my own backyard. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes this happens. You'll have agents that come in that are not members of the Hernando County Association of Realtors or the Hernando County Information System, and they'll place their listing in GTAR, in the Greater Tampa Area Association of Realtors, or Pinellas Realtor Association, West Pasco. Oftentimes they will not put them in the county that the property is located in. So you're doing a disservice to the seller by doing that. But what most of your productive agents are doing, especially your listing agents, when we take a listing on a property, of course it's going to go into the Hernando County Association of Realtors. I mean, that's where we're based out of, so it's going to go into Hernando County. Depending on how far north we are, we may put it into Citrus as well. We do have a reciprocal agreement with them, so we can enter it into Citrus County. So if I had something in the northern fringes of Hernando, along, say, Lake Lindsay Road, where I could attract a buyer from Floral City or Inverness, then it may pay to also put it into Citrus County for the consumer. But more importantly, we're going to go into the My Florida Regional MLS, using their or Stellar MLS. I apologize, Stellar MLS, using their system, which is very similar to what you see up in Citrus County. If you look at the front page as you're doing the data entry, they look almost identical. But there you're reaching, I believe we're in 20 central and southwestern Florida counties with over 90,000 realtors, versus only putting it into the Hernando County-based MLS with roughly 900 realtors, give or take.
Big difference.
So yeah, but these are things that cost money. So those memberships into all of these MLS services cost money, but it enhances the exposure. Typically will reduce your marketing time, but ultimately yields the consumer more money. But these are questions that a lot of people don't know to ask. Most people, when they think of MLS, they think there's one MLS, and that's it. Like there's a state-run MLS, but that couldn't be further. That's far from the truth. There are multiple different boards. Many boards have nothing to do with one another. There's no reciprocity. There are some boards that won't even allow you to pay to put a listing in unless you're a member.
Oh, wow.
So it varies dramatically from region to region.
You mentioned you had a client, you were in a property here along 19, and they referenced the property down the street, and that agent out of Citrus just put it in the Citrus County MLS.
Correct.
I had the same thing happen here with a client of mine. Had a large listing, very nice home. Agent came up out of Tampa, and it was not in the Hernando County MLS at all. It was in Stellar. Stellar is a good MLS to be in because it's got a lot of exposure, but the property was in Hernando. It should have, at a minimum, been in the Hernando MLS also. So, to your point, it's good to know, if you're thinking about listing your property, make sure that you know where your agent's going to place the property, and in terms of make sure they're getting it in all the right MLSs so you get maximum exposure. We are seeing a lot of buyers coming out of South Florida, the Tampa area, and so having access to putting these properties in Stellar, which goes you said to 90,000 agents, definitely gets you as the consumer the maximum exposure, and hope to get you more offers and more money in your pocket at the end of the day. So I know that you wanted to ask me some tax questions too, and we from time to time as we work with clients and they have a property for sale, of course one of the big things is how much tax am I going to pay? What's that going to look like? And so it varies. Some people, if they've held their house for a long time, they may have a real low cost basis. If it's their primary residence and you lived in it if it's been your primary residence 2 out of the last 5 years, and you're married, your gain can be $500,000 and you pay no tax. And so that's been a big benefit it's been in the tax code now for probably about 20 years, and a lot of folks have taken advantage of that and saved a lot of money. Before that, it was a much smaller exclusion, but at $500,000, and you can do that every 2 years. You can every 2 years sell your home as long as it's been your primary residence and make $500,000 in profit if you're married, and keep doing that every 2 years. So that's a really big benefit for consumers. And of course, moving is a hassle, but if you wanted to, you could actually do that. We also get clients asking us, they sell investment properties, like that they've had maybe a piece of rental property that they've owned for a period of years, and they've taken heavy depreciation on it. And so there will be some tax consequences to that. The good thing is, it's what they call if you've owned it for more than a year, whether it be an investment property, raw land, rental, whether it be residential, commercial, industrial, all those investments, and you held it for more than a year, qualify as a long-term capital gain. And the treatment on that, tax treatment, is the maximum tax rate is 20%. So ordinary income tax rates go as high as 37%. Long-term capital gains only go up to 20%, and which is can be a big tax savings if you're selling rental property. You've taken depreciation. The depreciation recapture component can go as high as 25%. So that's an extra 5% you have to pay back on the depreciation. Another question we get quite often is clients. Let's say it's not a piece of rental property, but it's been raw land. And so they just held this raw land for, let's say, 30 years, but they, and they've been they maybe paid to get it mowed. They may have taken trees down. They may have put a fence up, taken a fence down, paid property taxes, all those things. But if you're selling property, you should be, you go in and you sell it. Your accountant should be asking you, what's your basis in the property. They should be helping you create the basis if you don't know what it is, starting with what you paid for the property. So if you paid, let's say, $100,000 for the property, you begin adding to that. What are your property taxes? If you didn't take the property taxes off on your tax return annually, you can add those property taxes to the basis. If you for some reason paid some insurance on the property, let's say you want to have some liability insurance, add that. You paid to have it mowed, take some trees down, put a fence up. Any improvements you do to the property just continues to add to the basis. Let's just say you own it for, let's say, 15 years, and you own it jointly with your spouse, and your spouse dies. So let's say on the day your spouse dies, you've got a $150,000 cost basis between you and your spouse jointly. That's $75,000 each. So your basis is 75, and her basis is 75. I say her because I'm looking at you, Anthony, and thinking I'm advising you and talking about you and your wife. But so let's say on the day that your spouse passes away, the property is worth $400,000. So it's good to get the property appraised, or at least get an opinion of value on the property. And so when your spouse passes away and you're inheriting that property, you get to step up in basis for half the value. So your basis now becomes a $75,000, which is half the $150,000 that you and your spouse had prior to your spouse passing, and now you get half of the fair market value at your spouse's time of death, or $200,000. So your basis going forward is $275,000, which is half your basis prior to your spouse passing, and half the appraised value the appraised value or fair market value when on the date your spouse passed away. So, and let's say you hold the property for 10 more years after your spouse passes. You got to keep adding to that basis. So you can see that if you hold a piece of property for a long time, and you paid for things, there's been some major life changes like a spouse passing, all those things could have an impact on basis. And so you want to make sure that you have a very, very detailed conversation with your CPA when your taxes are done, to make sure you don't miss out on any basis increases while you own the property.
What if, for example, as you're trying to establish that basis, let's say I sold the property at $500,000, and the cost of sale the cost of sale by the time you've paid, compensation to the brokerage, any dock stamps, any of your customary closing costs, can that be added to
Yes.
So that is added to your tax basis? Okay.
And so, and that's a good question. So yeah, the cost that you pay as the seller to sell the property, all those closing costs get added. And if you paid any closing costs when you bought the property, you get to deduct those as well. So, closing cost to buy and sell definitely get added to your cost basis.
The other thing I would love if you could touch on, Randy, is we do get quite a few foreign sellers here.
Mm-hmm.
Reluctantly, and I say this tongue in cheek, they're mostly Canadians. I'm a big hockey fan,
There you go.
and I don't appreciate when I go down to a Lightning game and there's more Canadians up inside the stadium than there are Lightning jerseys, and that happens frequently when we get Montreal or Toronto coming into town.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these folks, can you talk a little bit about FIRPTA and the impact that has on a transaction?
Yeah, so the federal government, the IRS likes to collect all the money they can, and they realize that if someone is selling property and they live outside the country and they sell a piece of property here in the U.S. and they wind up, closing and taking the money out of the country, chances are they're probably never going to pay tax on the gain that they have on the property. So usually at closing, if you have a foreign individual, there's a withhold at the time of closing, and that money goes to the IRS, and that forces the individual that sold the property to have to file a tax return to document their gain and then pay tax. What I've typically found as I've done tax returns over the years for people that have these kind of transactions is typically they wind up getting a refund, because the FIRPTA withholding requirement is so high. So the IRS wants to make sure that they collect enough money. But it's to someone's benefit that if you do have a foreign if you are a foreigner living here, or you're advising someone that's a foreigner living here, make sure they file their taxes, because more than likely they're going to get a refund because the IRS made sure they took enough money out. So it would encourage them to file, pay what's actually due, and then they get that refund. So. Now, we don't do a lot of those returns. We do it from time to time. We do have foreigners that, of course, sell properties, but that's kind of what the IRS is trying to accomplish, is basically make sure that people don't skip town, if you will, or skip the country without paying their fair share of taxes. So, Anthony, let's pivot back to the market, and I want to talk to you about. We're talking about how inventory is starting to rise. listing prices starting to come down. What's your thoughts? I know when things are really hot, let's say 6 months or a year ago, if you weren't coming in with an all-cash offer or a huge equity position, you just couldn't even get the attention of a seller. So if you were coming in with an FHA loan, a VA loan, those weren't even getting looked at. Is that still the case, or does the buyer now have some opportunities in this market?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, and it's an excellent time for buyers right now, because when we had at any given time, we had maybe 175, 180 homes for sale. We had
That's
a several
incredible.
week supply of inventory. So when that was the case, sellers could be very choosy.
Mm-hmm.
And what was going to happen, if I put a property on the market, just say a typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a 2-car garage, for argument's sake, let's say it was priced around $350. Within 2 to 3 days, I had 10 or 12 offers on that home. And the sellers would take the cash offers. They were looking for cash offers. Some people were waiving any contingencies. Some people were waiving inspection contingencies. They were trying to do whatever they could to sweeten the pot to make their offer stand out. If you were a first-time buyer coming into Hernando County wanting to put 3.5% down and finance through the FHA, good luck. They were looking at you like you were a leper. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't even consider those offers. Those terms weren't even being offered by the seller. If most any listing that you looked at said cash and conventional. We have one of the highest percentage of our population. I think 12% of our population are veterans.
Really?
We have one of the highest percentage of veterans here in the state of Florida. Those offers weren't even being looked at. They wouldn't even entertain them. Because remember now, with the VA loans, they're usually financing 100%. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of concerns about appraisal gaps, because we were running into scenarios where, you have a buyer coming in asking or above for a property, and the appraisals just weren't staying in pace with what was going on in the market. So when there was a zero equity position to begin with, you end up finding yourself back at the negotiating table again. And the sellers were looking at it. Even veteran sellers, as much as they would love to give a veteran an opportunity, didn't want to be in a position where they were off the market and then back to the negotiating table because of a gap or an appraisal shortfall. So now's a great time. And when you consider what the rents are out there, I mean, a typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a 2-car garage in just an ordinary section of Spring Hill, nothing with amenities, nothing private or gated, nothing on the water, you're going to spend $200 to $2,200 a month to rent. Mm-hmm. So even with the higher interest rates, it still pays to own. We know at some point we'll see rates modify again. Rates will drop, and when they do, you can refinance when they drop. But it's and then if you look, the availability of rentals is almost nil. Yeah. There's not been much out there anyways. So it's for buyers right now, it's a relief. It's a very, very good time. I could tell you it was very difficult to represent a buyer, because I could go out with a buyer that was well qualified, but I could write 10 or 12 offers and still never be able to get that buyer a house, because they were losing out to these institutional buyers that were coming in, paying cash for properties. We get a lot of people that were coming out of northern markets. And if you're coming out of New York, you could have sold a bungalow in New York, and where I came from out in Smithtown, you sold your bungalow for $900,000, and coming to Florida was like going to Mexico with U.S. currency. Yeah. So there were people coming down with chunks of equity or almost all cash. And that's slowing down right now, because a lot of those markets, we're very fortunate here in the Tampa Bay area, but a lot of those markets where people were coming out of, the brakes are just, they're fully on. I mean, they're struggling more so up in those markets. But again, an excellent time for a buyer.
Well, good information, Anthony, and I want to thank you for coming by today and sharing your words of wisdom with us. And if you're looking to sell property, whether it be a residence, commercial, industrial, business brokering, myself and Anthony at the Suncoast team can help you out. We have, 14 members now on the Suncoast team as well that we're working that work with us and help our clients out. Is it 4 now?
Tara McVicker, Rhonda Jones, Abigail, my daughter, and if you want to count me, that's 4.
Okay. And so, definitely give us a call. If you want to reach us, call us here at Suncoast CPA Group, 352-596-2883. Let me give your cell phone number out on the phone, on the radio, if that's okay. Sure. Anthony Canaris, 352-585-3872. Please give us a call. And also, if you have any questions on taxation when it comes to real estate, if you're looking to, sell a piece of property, wondering what your taxation is going to be, please give us a call here again at Suncoast CPA Group, or check us out on the web at suncoastcpagroup.com. Love to help you out. And thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.